Okay, we can start like we usually do here. I'm going to share my screen and kind of step through it. And as I step through it, feel free to pipe up or raise your hand with a comment. So just I wasn't gonna I didn't have anything for this seminar over the weekend. And then this thing landed in my inbox and I was like, oh, you know what? This would be good for us. 'Cause it's kind of more again like one of those thought pieces, not a tutorial. And AI is in the news everywhere. And this was kind of I thought a really most of the news articles in AI are like, look at this amazing thing. And this really kind of got to like the nuts and bolts of like what's happening in industry. And I thought it was kind of cool that way. So it's a little bit different perspective than I think we see in in the media. Or maybe I should say A1. Did anyone see the Department of the Secretary of Education calling it A1 at the meeting this week?
I
It was
couldn't. I
hilarious.
couldn't believe it.
That's pretty amazing. So, the article starts out kind of talking about the C-suite's impression, and I thought it was that. So that was kind of what I expected. They see it as like an efficiency, a cost-saving tool, and a lot of the big executives are trying to figure out ways to like get it in their companies and I would say like force implementation of it, and then driving metrics to encourage slash push their developers to using AI tools like you know like autopilot or autopilot, right? Yeah, and stuff like that. Um, then I thought this or Copilot is what it's called. I thought this paragraph was interesting. Like, a lot of coders were like, yeah, it works pretty good. But as I start to ask it more complicated things and start to really push it, it's starting to fall down in all but the easier questions that I ask. Um, and so I thought, that was in the favorable rating kind of going down um, and here, 76% said they spend more time debugging AI code than before. So I don't know if that means the tools are getting worse, or if that just means that we're kind of relying on it more and asking it more difficult questions. Thought that was an interesting um, kind of observation by the developers.
I
Mm,
liked that particularly, Patrick, because the same thing, even when you're asking it to help with writing or something, it's the same exact issue. You have to probe further and it gets a little bit more convoluted or things don't flow. But in the case of coding, and maybe it's just me, because I don't usually try to write efficient code. I just usually am trying to get something complicated, you know what I mean?
Run once.
Yeah, and then, I'll figure, well, somebody else can make this go fast or figure out, For me, I love it because it's the simpler syntax things that I always get stuck on. So the fact that I can ask it and it can get me started, I usually want to do the more in-depth component myself or just figure, that's not out there anyway, because nobody's been trying to do this, So, but I loved that they called it out in this particular paper. So, I mean, I'm really happy you sent this. I did
yeah,
not read the paper in gory detail, but I mean, it wasn't the kind of paper that you had to read
right,
in gory
right,
detail.
right.
So,
Yeah, no, I think. Oh, go ahead, Scott.
I was going to say I concur. I think that the 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 secret or the value proposition is smaller bytes. It's like I need to decode this data structure and do this index and map this to some lambda function. It's like, could you write 4 lines Python for me? Oh, thank you. Don't have it architect your whole workflow. I don't think that's beneficial at this point.
Yeah, I think Donna's observation about them being good at syntax
yeah.
Yeah.
and less good at semantics
Exactly.
is a really interesting observation that I hadn't kind of separated in my brain yet.
That
And
makes
Because
perfect
for me,
sense,
it's
though.
different because my head was into it when I was a grad student, and I was always trying to learn something, but I remembered everything when I learned those languages. Now I need to it's just different. I'm just not up on the things that really should be simpler, but it's just I'm not working in the language every single day. So, and especially graphics, I have been floored. Like usually I want to plot this, and normally that used to be you know what I mean, nightmarish part of it, but you can find that so easily now. And I was like, oh, okay, this is what it can do, you know?
Yeah.
I don't know. I really for coding, I
And
like it.
I think that dovetails in with what I said is like if you instead of reading the manual or the API and looking for what combination of 6 parameters gives you
Yeah.
the slice you like,
Mhm.
that's a perfect sort of, absorb this text and boil it down and make it queryable. And that seems to be, I think, where a value proposition is.
Yeah, I agree in this world of, so Donna, I mean, I don't think it's that you're doing it less. I think the languages have gotten there's more
Verbose.
keywords.
Yeah.
Because now we're in this world of APIs, right? Like, I think Java really dove us into the world of APIs. And
Yeah.
prior to Java, things were just like simpler and you knew like what you had to do and there was
Yeah.
like objects and then Java released this big API with it and all of a sudden you had all these things you could do and Python has just like made that go
Yep.
even more down,
10
more down
different
that
ways to
path.
do the same, end goal.
And so there's more to remember. Like I, I was talking with Ben the other day and he was like, I needed Pandas to do something and it kind of knew what it wanted it to do and it just like provided the API thing like magically for me. And I think that is like, and it works. It's the same for me. Like I've started just like typing dot plot after things, and like 90% of the time it works. At least to a basic degree.
Well, that
So
makes me feel better because I think of you as so far ahead of me when it comes to actually doing it. But a lot of my students, in order to get something novel or new done, we have to create a new algorithm.
yeah.
And so I hope it's not out there. You know what I mean? It's like I
Mhm.
need to get this started and then I want to put what I think should be done inefficiently in code,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. And I find it interesting that so they talk about, debugging AI code. And like in your paradigm, I'm going to call it your paradigm because you've started talking about it you really shouldn't need AI. You shouldn't have to debug AI code, right? Because it's just providing syntax. Like if you're asking to do semantics and like actual algorithms,
yeah,
then yeah, you will have to debug it because it's not going to get inside your brain and kind of know what you want it to do unless you provide a really good prompt. And
right.
even then, yeah. I also find like in the world of APIs, like a quarter, more often than it should, AI returns an API that doesn't exist. Like,
Hmm.
oh, you want to do this? So there must be an API for it, and it just like makes it up. And I'm like, well, I wish I could do that too, but I think that's one of its big problems right now is that like for things that are just slightly more complicated than basic, it tends to provide an API that isn't there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I will
When
say
you
that one
say,
of the
sorry,
one of the
when you say like the Java brought us into the world of APIs, like, what do you mean? Because then you were talking about how you use like dot plot and it like works like 90% of the time, and that's just like a code. Like that's just the IDE, right? And those are not the same thing. So I'm not
No,
totally following what you were saying there.
yeah. So I I mean us other old timers, correct me if I'm wrong, but like C, Fortran, Basic, like all of these languages before Java just had like keywords and for loops and while loops. And you kind of had to like write your own code to do everything else
yeah, there weren't a lot of
code
libraries.
or find a code to download. C kind of had like headers, but that felt really different than an API. Like you had to specifically go out and find it and download it into your C project and kind of manage it. And with Java, all of a sudden you would go like Java API and you could do logging and like graphical interface and like dates and all these like really great functionality that just wasn't baked in before. Like you had to manually deal with dates and all these old languages. And Python's really expand on that. As Python grows, its API, it's like swallowing more things up. Like every version of Python integrates more of the community APIs into its core than the previous version. And so I mean, it's almost impossible to find someone with an environment in Python that doesn't have pandas or NumPy imported, right?
Well,
They're
I was
just
just going to
so
mention
critical. And
mention
sorry, I'll finish up quick, Scott. In like C, I can think like standard IO was a common header, and there were like other common headers, but it just didn't feel the same way that everything was in an API and you could just go to one place and find all this great functionality.
Okay, I
It's
see what you
funny,
meant. I guess my framing of API was like I wasn't sure like so you're saying like Python libraries and like our libraries are sort of like sort of an API. As
Yeah,
I thought
they
of
are.
APIs as like pulling down data or whatever from like a web source.
Well, like
I don't know.
yeah, like a web service. No. I meant more like the functional APIs,
Okay.
like
All right, I got it.
Pandas and NumPy, and yeah.
All right. Sorry, Scott,
That's a
you
good
go.
question.
I was going to comment on the proliferation of data types, data structures, I think is what has complicated a lot of things. You look at it now and say, should I be using NumPy? Should I be using Pandas? Should I be using Xarray? Should I, there's all these data structures and extended data structures that we just didn't worry about or didn't have. You used C, you had arrays and linked lists and not much more. And you built everything yourself. I mean, if you needed stacks, you wrote a stack. Now it's just all there, and the dictionaries are there, and they all have, optional parameters and extensions, and just decoding or keeping all that in your head, I think, has just made knowing the full breadth of a language a bigger task than it used to be.
Yeah.
So I rely heavily on like Stack Overflows and things. If I say, how do I run? I have this, I want that. How do I get from here to there? And looking for breadcrumbs where somebody's already solved it. And I just see the AI being able to scrape that and present it in a better searchable fashion is how I would make use of it, rather than saying, here's, write my entire algorithm for me. I don't see where that's going to be a benefit for us. And I mentioned earlier, my son works in corporate software. He works on Cox Automotive doing, the back end inventory control for car dealers. And their company has been pushing for, greater productivity and through use of these things. And their development team just says, these are critical business needs. If you inject this bug in it, or even a performance issue and it increases response time on this query by a couple of milliseconds, things start to fall apart and customer satisfaction goes down. So, I mean, it's not a tool that's for everybody to be able to just throw something in an AI code generator and then push it to production. Doesn't work for them.
Yeah, like we're all I mean I get furious when I have to deal with like call robots, like if I call Chase or something. Like this is just like an extension of that where like if you have, I mean that's oversimplifying obviously, but like if you have like code that's like not very good and you're working with an AI all the time, like I can see how like that would I mean I would hate it. Like if I was like trying to use a service and I could tell like it was written by AI instead of written by a human that like knows what a human wants. Like I think that's a pretty like notable issue with this sort of thing.
I thought this article brought, there's a new term that I read in this called tech debt, which I thought
I was
really
just gonna ask if people knew
encapsulates.
what that was. Okay, good.
I haven't heard of it before, but I think it's really encapsulates like sort of, I guess, one of the more anticipated consequences of like, I guess, this moment in software development where like this push to like productivity and like adopting AI. It's sort of like a race to the bottom in a sense. Like, oh, our competitors are using AI, so therefore we must. And kind of like pushing to adopt kind of shoddier code or less robust code. And the concept of that being like a debt that future engineers are going to have to work with or solve or figure out is, I think that's an important concept to put a label to. And it's also kind of concerning if you pair that with the fact that you can find, I mean, I've read other articles that say like young developers, new programmers are relying more and more on AI and less on, understanding abstract like sort of data structures and algorithms, or kind of the root of, having a less firmer grasp on like a language and relying more on AI. And that combined with this tech debt phenomenon could lead to some adverse situations, I think, down the line if those two trains collide.
Technical debt has been around as a term and a reality for decades.
Okay.
This is accelerating it, I think, is what the article. There's a companion article that you click through and talks specifically about technical debt as it applies to AI generated code. So just another facet, another amplifier, that you generate code that you don't necessarily fully understand, and therefore you can't reuse. So you're just generating more and more code that you can't maintain, and you don't have the resources on hand to, augment or extend.
It is like interesting that like there is a ton of tech debt that could like be instantly wiped out with AI. Like if you have like old government software that's like that, like we don't have like public servants that are working in tech for like, niche organizations or whatever, like, I don't know, parts of the IRS or parts of like housing committees or whatever. Like they're using like old, like super antiquated software that not even humans know how to read anymore. Like I think I was reading this book that got recently published called Abundance by Ezra Klein. He's like a New York Times columnist, and it's got some good stuff on it, but it's like, I don't know, it's an interesting book. But yeah, there's like, I think it's COBOL. Is that a really old coding language?
It is.
Right. I wouldn't know what to do with that, and it'd be a huge waste of my time to, like, if I was being hired by the government to go and learn it just so I could rewrite it in Python or something like that. And like that's a great application of AI. And that way it can solve tech debt by like, talk about race at the bottom. Then you're like in the sediment from like old stuff. You can bring it out of that at least.
Yep.
COBOL programmers are making upwards of $250K a year these days.
It's definitely
never mind. I'll learn it.
The issue with that though is to use these things, you need to train the tools, and you need a deep understanding of a language to do a mapping. And the problem with COBOL is nobody has a deep understanding of the language anymore. It's not something you go scrape a bunch of GitHub databases for COBOL and understand how it works. It's you'd be data starved, I think, to solve that particular mapping.
So there's hope for me, Patrick, because people want me to program in Fortran or COBOL. I'm good.
A retirement
So
job.
what did you use COBOL for?
Those were actually no, I have to say first 4 languages. Yeah, I don't know. They just required. I told Pat this the other day. I loved the fact that I learned different languages for different courses.
Okay.
And, Perl when I took an A&N class, because of, just the structure. It started to make my brain think, oh my God, they're writing this language for this kind of application. My first language was Fortran, but then I just,
Thought maybe you
I never got
into COBOL with one of your jobs or something.
No, that wasn't it. Anyway, this is fascinating.
A lot of businesses have some, mega lines of code in COBOL, old infrastructure.
Yeah.
Just for the sake of discussion, like, so technical debt is, it takes many different forms, right? And so I think like when the first thing I think about when I think of technical debt is old code that you have to maintain because it's part of the system, but like you don't really want to maintain it anymore. It just has to be there. Yeah. And it kind of gets drugged from version to version.
You're afraid to touch it.
Yeah. But there's other kinds of technical debt too that I think fall in that category. And like Ben hinted at one. One is like the requirement, like old requirements for like old hardware. Like a lot of code only runs on certain hardware, and now you have technical debt of maintaining this like old piece of hardware. So technical debt can be hardware as well. It can also be people, right? Like you have like that old crusty guy in the corner cranking code away and like doesn't know Python, only writes stuff in Fortran, then everyone has to like know Fortran. I mean, that's technical debt too. So I think it takes many, many different forms, but generally it's just the lack of dumping old things and kind of remaking it in the new in the new technology. And it happens because our technology moves so fast, right? Like, I mean, Python, R, they're very fast moving languages. And like Pandas is great now, but there's like a bunch of people competing to be the next Pandas. And like in 2 years, we might not even be importing Pandas anymore. It might be, Adobe's Arrow or Polars. So yeah, all that technical debt really starts to add up because you have to continually recode your old code to keep up with the new standards.
I think another really like important part, well, I don't know, that's one thing that like AI, it takes so much energy. And like this, I think like the average AI query takes about 5 times as much energy as a Google search.
Mm-hmm.
And there's like real concerns with like energy availability for AI and like simply just being able to power like these systems when they're being like adopted by more and more people for more and more complex tasks. And like there is like simply like not an energy availability, especially when you look at like clean energy availability. And like I find myself feeling guilty sometimes when I am like relying on AI to like do simple tasks. And in the last few months, I've definitely like stopped using it unless I really need some help or like I'm stuck, right? And I think like unless we have a more abundant energy source or like not unlimited but relatively unlimited source through like solar or whatever, then there's like real ethical concerns with using AI at all. And then there's like a whole host of other like ethical like IP concerns or whatever, but those are also part of the equation.
No, I 100% agree, Ben. Yeah. The amount of energy getting sucked down by AI on a daily basis now is obscene.
Have you seen the articles? There's been more than one instance where big tech companies basically are recommissioning nuclear reactors.
Yeah, on
Reactors
3
that
Mile
are
Island.
being taken off the grid. They're saying, well, can I have that?
Yeah.
I will use all of its output. I will run it at a low rate and use all of its output to drive my data center.
And that's definitely not sustainable. Like that is a stopgap that like will not.
Yeah, that's not going to bridge you into the future.
No. Yeah, that was on the 3 Mile. That was 3 Mile Island, like one of the nuclear reactors that survived the like partial meltdown. I think Google or Meta bought it and is using the output from it now. Just crazy.
Yeah.
There's an article in December I'm looking at from NPR where it referenced exactly that. 3 Mile Island.
Great points. All right.
There's like a lot of the tech companies are like making commitments to use clean energy for their AI because there is such like a narrative around its unsustainability, but there is simply not just renewable energy or sustainable energy that can power these things.
Yeah.
I also wonder too, like how, I guess this is more like I would be curious, like see the software developers or just hear what people, at least in this meeting, have to say. But like in terms of like trusting, I guess this gets into, I mean, this is such as like on tech debt or technical debt and those kind of things. But like, I don't know, if I use Copilot and it's like touching any of my files in any capacity, like I find myself very like distrusting of it. Like I need to check, make sure it didn't accidentally delete something that works, or it didn't introduce garbage or junk. And it on the surface, it looks like it does a lot of cool stuff, but there has been times where like I'm glad I've done those closer inspections. I'm like, oh, aha, it introduced a little typo here or a little syntax error there. And that's like maybe when it's touching like a big chunk of a file. But I can easily see how it'd be super easy to get careless and sort of like prompt AI to, or Copilot, one of these agents to like rework or refactor an entire file and then go run it and test it. And all of a sudden you're getting these new errors and you're like, where did these come from? I don't actually understand. Like, I can see how it can create more problems, become more work than, than not using it. At least that's kind of my concern whenever I try to use any kind of AI tools. Like, okay, just don't mess it up. I don't like try to improve it. But I'm most concerned about like
Yeah.
these agents. Like,
I feel the same way about Git merge. So, what did you do to my files? I don't trust you. Which actually I was going to bring up. I wonder whether an appropriate entry point or middle ground for this sort of generated code would be to generate test suites. Not critical code necessarily, but say here's my API, I've written it up, and can you I need a test suite that maps these and make it automatable so I can have Git just launch it every time I do a commit. It's like I'd play with that. I might play with that.
God, I think you just funded your retirement. Seriously, like I'm being a little facetious, but like I think these very special purpose AIs, in my experience, way outperform the general purpose ones. So if you could like take a ChatGPT and like train it further on like test suite kind of development. Like I've seen folks just like add a couple documents to like, to like the standard large language models and then use them in very cool ways. That's just within the Cairo grant. Some group like ingested a city's like water use documentation. And now they have this agent that the public could query, like, what's my water bill? Or like, how do I, do this or that with the water system? And it was like generating really good responses. It was basically regurgitating the documents. Like that's what they wanted. And now they didn't have to like answer the phone every time someone had a question that they could have just Googled and, found in their documents. So I think these special purpose ones are really kind of slick.
I do too. I like the notebook, AI or ML that where you can put in your own documents and it'll only use those to create things. That way it's not trying to be creative. It's literally helping to synthesize from the information you give to it. Even if you give the references for papers and ask it to, do something only using those sources, it's a little bit more like, if I were a grad student trying to write an intro even, wouldn't it be nice if you've compiled a good list of papers and they're solid and they come from reputable sources, to then have it try and do something with those would be much better than just trying to, kind of randomly be creative on me. Anyway, I love this. I have to go to a faculty meeting, but every month this happens to me for one of these. So thank you.
Figure it out. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, that's where I find, if you don't know what went into the training of your, generator, you don't know that it was good code to start with, right. Which is part of the problem. The conversations I had with my son about these AIs, it's like if you're going to go and scrape Stack Overflow for all of the best advice, turn off that phone. But there's a whole bunch of Stack Overflow answers that have been downvoted because they're awful. It's like, are you weighting, what you scrape based on, sort of, some sort of a metric? I don't know. I don't know.
These are accepted answers that aren't all that great.
Yeah, I know. Well, and the other thing is that it's always a moving target as well, right? Because the general consensus as to what's acceptable or what you can get away with, or I need to do this for performance reasons. Well, performance isn't really the problem anymore. It's data data security or data quality, or, it's like, I'd rather go slower and have this more robust algorithm with a better calculation than worry about how many threads I'm using. That the calculus changes over time.
Yeah. It's great. So moving on in the article a little bit, and so the next talk kind of about executives and kind of the kind of dumb metrics they've come up with to get people to try to use AI, like code acceptance rates. What else is in here?
Those
Yeah.
darn supervisors.
Right. Just, trying to kind of push developers to using it by tweaking the metrics that they get evaluated on. And so I thought that was interesting. For those of us that have been in the corporate world, that this really rang a little too close to home for me, at least.
Yeah. And then
Like,
that's another age-old problem. How do you measure programmer productivity?
Right.
Lines of code is a lousy measurement, and yet
Yeah.
it is probably one of the most often cited measures.
Yeah. So the next section was talking about, there's certain folks in the industry that are doing it in a much better way, right? That they're empowering the developers to like kind of use it where it makes sense. And they're seeing, productivity increases by less making it like a rule and more providing the tools and encouragement. And so, and like understanding like what Donna was saying actually before, like AI is really good for some things like syntax, and it's not great for others. And so we should think about what it's good at and encourage people to use it for those things, and not make it part of like the performance metric, in terms of, making people really embrace it when it might not be the best tool for the job. Yes, that was kind of the article. Any other thoughts or comments?
I could add my perspective on using
Yeah,
these
for
tools.
sure. For sure.
Mostly because like I was very resistant for no good reason other than just being stubborn to like using some of these tools. And I've been recently using Gemini a little bit, and I have found it's good at a lot of things and then really bad at other things. And some of this was already said, like simplifying code that I've already written, it's pretty good at. Especially because if I'm like trying to maybe post process some output, the first time I write it, it's really clunky and whatnot. And it's pretty good at like chopping it down. I have found that it really excels at explaining error messages, especially
Oh,
if you're using like obscure Python packages where maybe there's not a lot of like Stack Overflow or like other forums. I found it like it does an incredible job, and it'll even tell you like try changing this to fix your error. And also for like larger tasks, I have found that you have to ask it things like incrementally. Like the other day, I was like, I'm running some code. I'm curious, like I want to plot like my CPU usage as I run this code. And if you just ask it like, write me a Python script to plot CPU usage in Matplotlib, it like wasn't working. But if you go like piece by piece, you're like, first, write me some code to get CPU info, then save it to a log file, then like plot with Matplotlib. It can like handle that in chunks much better than just trying to tackle one big problem from the start.
interesting.
But yeah, that's just been my experience with it. It likes these little bite-sized pieces, I think.
Yeah. So out of curiosity, like you said you're using Gemini, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And like Noah, you're using Copilot, like the built-in Copilot to VS Code, so that's GitLab's Copilot. What have other people played around with? Like, what's other people's go-to? Anything else that we haven't mentioned, or another plus one to one of those other two?
Classic ChatGPT. I use that as well. Specifically, like they have GPTs tailored to different tasks. So they have a Python GPT
Oh,
and kind of a general like coding Copilot GPT. Um, I use those sometimes as well.
Just to chime in, I was also gonna say GPT and Copilot are probably the ones I spent the most time on. And like Ryan was talking about, it's interesting to note some of their quirks and differences. So I feel like Copilot's more conversational. Uh, I think GPT just got an update that's trying to make it more friendly and understandable by a more generic audience. But Copilot's really good at what I feel like uh, reviewing emails as well. It's like if I feel like the email I've typed up isn't the best, I'll be like, "Hey, Copilot, can you read over my email, make sure grammar looks all right?" And I'll read over it, and it does a good job at optimizing flow. Whereas ChatGPT may offer more lengthier suggestions or just change the email, the meaning of the email sometimes. So Copilot's been great for emails. Uh, but like Ryan was also mentioning, sometimes these tools, whenever and I don't use them for coding often, because like the article said, I feel like I'm babysitting the AI tool rather than being the developer. So while it while it's really helpful to break it, ask it to optimize code or even review your code or generate new code in small segments, uh, it feels like sometimes it just changes the code entirely. So I spend more time double checking some of the suggestions that it's made rather than fixing my bugs, for example, or just optimizing my workflow. So sometimes it slows me down more than helping. But I feel like it's an adaptation curve. It's really about learning which tool to use in which manner. Like we talked about, all of these different AI tools, GPT, Copilot, Gemini, even and when I say Copilot, I'm talking about Microsoft's Copilot, not GitHub Copilot, but that's also a tool that's available in readily available in IDEs now. All of them have special quirks, so they don't all work the same way. If something worked well for GPT, it doesn't necessarily translate well into working well for Gemini. So I think it's really limit testing what these tools can do, and us as coders, if we try and understand the quirkiness that each of these tools has individually, could help us in utilizing these tools into our workflows a bit better. As far as that article mentioning that, hey, all of these company executives are like, AI is the hot thing right now, and we need to hop on this train as fast as possible. It may be helpful if there's, instead of top down, I also posted this thing in the chat. I was just reading through articles randomly, and this is a 2025 paper of Zoom, Zoom Info specifically, and their team deploying Copilot uh, in a very structured and well-mannered way, where they're taking feedback, they're implementing on small engineering groups. They're acknowledging their feedback of what's working well, what's not. They're acknowledging the limitations that Copilot has itself. So I really feel like there are different ways of going about it. Some companies are just panicking that we need to hop on this AI train immediately or we'll get left behind. And in doing so, they may not be training themselves or their employees uh, to really utilize AI's potential. Uh, like we mentioned, there are some sentiments about coders, developers feeling like it's slowing down their productivity rather than helping them. Whereas there are more successful use cases of more slower implementation and more structured feedback into how AI is incorporated into coding workflows, where people are seeing improved productivities. So I feel like it's the structure of how it's being implemented in a company that can really help people navigate how to get the most productivity out of these AI tools, rather than the over reliance of I'm just gonna ask AI to build this entire 200-line code for me, and I'll just try and see if it works or not.
Yeah, interesting. Shari, so you said a couple things that really got me thinking. You were talking about babysitting it, and that brought me back to like, so in the NVIDIA's GP or GTC this year, that's about a month ago. Jensen, the founder and CEO of NVIDIA, was talking about how they're going to have all of their developers by the end of the year with, using AI tool. But he called them AI workers. And the way that he imagines it is more like what you were talking, like actually the developers will be like supervisors of these AI workers, and they'll be dozens of AI workers all cranking out code, and the human developers will be like their managers versus actual developers anymore. And I think, realizing that paradigm versus like, I think what most people think of AI as is like doing my job for me. But if we think about it more as like workers and we have to supervise them and use our expertise to like hone their answers, that becomes to me a lot more palatable. Like it just changes your context and your expectations for what it generates. And so I think that's really it's interesting you said babysit, because that really brought me back to Jensen's kind of framing of what AI coders are going to be. Like it's going to be a bunch of like like silly undergrads cranking out code, and then the postdocs, grad students, and PIs are going to have to like go in and like fix it. But like that in a way, I mean, that's kind of how we structure all of corporate America, right? Like there's this hierarchy, and it's been relatively successful. So maybe we think got to just change our frame of reference.
I definitely think that's a more accurate frame of reference, like babysitting, or sort of like the human job is to sort of monitor, keep the AI worker on track, right? Make sure it's doing the thing you actually want it to be doing. Because it's, and on a like more minute scale, it's definitely changed. Like just sort of reflecting on how I've coded before and after the release of like these AI agents. It's definitely different. And it's definitely like in the past, I would feel like I would have to I feel like I knew more syntax, or like like for, I guess bash scripting is a great example. Like there's some really helpful commands that's really good to know, whether it's chmod, find, cp, or move, or any of these these are just basic Linux like shell commands. And it used to be important, like in the back of my head, to know the syntax, know how these work, know what they can and can't do, because that's how you build scripts, right? You're like, okay, I'll use this function, this command to do this, and then next I'll use this other command to do that, pipe them together, put them in a script, whatever. I don't need to think that way anymore, because I can just say, hey, ChatGPT, write me a quick bash script to go scan these directories and find, files that match this string. And then there you go. And like in 30 seconds that you have that script, and it's easy to test because you can see, does it work or does it not? So there's and I don't know if like that's a good or bad thing, but because it definitely offloads like sort of that mental or that knowledge burden. Like I don't have to know these things, or the ins and outs of the code. Like I just have to tell ChatGPT or whatever AI agent what to do, and I have to know how to test it. But I don't have to know what each line per se is doing. I can ask ChatGPT or whatever agent to explain that, but so it definitely in my experience, it definitely puts you in a more like you're kind of more of an overseer. But I could definitely see that leading to problems in a future where that's everybody, all humans are like kind of the overseers or managers, and now nobody really knows what the
Depends on how good your base is. I mean, because I've been doing it long enough to have, you used to have to hand assemble stuff, and you were dealing with hardware registers, pushing things in, popping things off, doing branches and go-tos in bytecodes. Nobody wants to do that. That's the wrong place for your brain to be spending all its time. We just keep layering more and more, sort of cognitive improvements or cognitive higher level thinking on our programming. I think this is just another layer. Object oriented was all the big rage, and we obviously are using it. It's just another tool in the box. I think AI, generators are going to be the same thing. It's going to be another fancy think tool in the box. There's always got to be somebody that's got the big idea as to what to do. And if you're thinking at that level, then you're not spending all your time worrying about whether you've balanced your semicolons and your braces and where your
Right.
your else clause is terminated, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and these layers are important. They help us, be more efficient and do the higher level thinking, which we're good at as human beings. Yeah.
Yeah, just to add to Noah and Scott's statements, it's especially helpful when you're coding in multiple languages. So C++ is syntax heavy, and Python's a very high level language in comparison. It's more user friendly in that sense. So having to go back to C++, I'd keep forgetting to put semicolons at the end of my code statements.
Yeah.
And that's probably the most errors I had. But uh, to you guys' point, it feels like I don't have to remember as much syntax heavy stuff because number one, there's improved documentation now. Stack Overflow has gotten a lot better with people contributing and there being good recorded responses. As to before, I saw lots of Stack Overflow discussions where people responded, but there wasn't any actual solution. uh, so yeah, I'd have to spend 4 to 5 hours just reading Stack Overflow to find my exact problem. Uh, and it would still not solve my exact problem because sometimes your problem is so niche that you have to do specific changes for your version of the code. So having these tools, like Ryan was mentioning, for example, Gemini may be good at recognizing these errors and explaining it to you. Uh, I've tried to use, I haven't used Gemini as much, but I found that these tools are good at understanding and recognizing errors in codes. So if there's something that I feel like I can't find quickly on Stack Overflow, it's definitely good to give these tools a shot because they get you thinking in the right direction of where the problem could be. Uh, I also noticed that sometimes I have a bias. So if I'm coding in a language for a long period of time and I see an error that looks something like I've seen in the past, I just assume that the thing that fixed it the first time would be the thing that I need to fix now. So I'm wasting my time trying to make fixes that worked in the past, but that's not the real problem this time around. So it's kind of good to just get that quick hint from it of where these errors could be or what's causing the issue, and then spend your efforts debugging over there.
Yeah. The other thing you mentioned, Sharia, is Copilot. So I don't think it's coincidence that Microsoft Copilot and GitHub Copilot are the same name. Microsoft bought GitHub, right? So I
I
wonder how similar those two products actually are under the hood, or if it's more like what Noah was talking about, where ChatGPT has like a Python GPT and like a coding GPT. I think it's probably the same network.
it it could likely. I'm not sure if Microsoft did buy them, but even if they did, I feel like the the AI tools that are integrated into these online or even software IDEs work slightly more efficiently than the ones that you can generically type into your web browser and be like chat copilot AI.com or whatever because it's more coding focused. It knows
Yeah.
that its purpose is to serve as a AI tool to assist in coding tasks. So it's more streamlined in its explanations as well. Whereas Copilot or GPT may sometimes go beating around the bush and then get to the issue at hand.
Yeah. Have you guys used Amorphic? It's the AI powered by Wolfram. So it's super interesting. I know it because Noah, your dad uses it all the time. That's the one that he subscribes to. And it's a two-step process. You give it a context. So you tell it like you're an expert in coding now. And then you give it the question. And it seems to work really well as long as you can like put it in the right context. So I wonder if that's what these like, coding ones are doing. It's like it's kind of providing that context for the AI, and then you provide the prompt. But I haven't seen any other products would actually is like a two-step process where it's like I want you to be an expert in this, and now here's my question.
I feel like people may be just defaulting to prompt engineering for that context.
Yeah.
Because yeah, ChatGPT can be really powerful if we learn how to ask it particular questions. So like you just said, if even in that two-step framing, we could kind of do the same thing with GPT usage.
You can, like in
Whereas,
one, yeah.
yeah, so like 4.0 is a generic model, or 3 is a generic model. It's not specialized in, for example, Python GPT. So giving it that slight context beforehand makes it think differently. So I've actually used these tools and found them really helpful for testing my own knowledge for interviews and theoretical components.
Mhm.
So even for my comp examinations, it was a great way to review the syllabus that I had to cover. So I just be like, these are the things that I need to go through. I feel like I'm ready. Ask me a whole bunch of open-ended questions in this interview format of covering all of these concepts. And it did a
Mhm.
really good job
Hmm.
at going through each of the topics listed in these syllabi, and asking good questions. And I told it to ask for examples where appropriate, correct me where my answer is not sufficient or to the par of what, for example, a top 500 company would ideally look for. So I'm not asking it to give me lead code type questions because I don't know how it'll evaluate that. But as far as these theoretical open-ended interview-based questions go, I feel like it's really good at testing your knowledge or even augmenting it.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Well, it's top of the hour. Any closing comments? This was
I
great. I'm
I
super happy that this worked. Yeah, go ahead.
I'd just like to close with, I think it's really important, and you mentioned this, and we talked about it as well. AI tools should be looked at as a supporting tool rather than a fix-all solution. So maybe there's a 50-50% contribution or a 70-30, but it should never be AI first, where the AI is doing 70% of a person's job, and eventually you'll get to a point like Noah was mentioning where the human may fade out of the loop entirely. So there's always going to be that need for strong foundational basis, like Scott was saying, of us always knowing what's going on in the process and just using AI to optimize some repetitive tasks rather than taking over an entire part or parts of our role entirely.
I agree. I think that's perfect ending. Sounds good. You have a good weekend. We'll see you in 2 weeks. Take care.
Hi, everyone.